built UrtheCast to be the company that would provide HD video in 1 meter resolution to every human who has an internet connection. So they would have the perspective that the early astronauts had when they saw Earth for the first time from space.
On the periscope, what a beautiful view.
What a beautiful view.
Cloud cover over Florida.
So the first notion of the idea, however, was really to be a competitor to Google. Like, how do we be a competitor to Google on a consumer level? Like, could you imagine Google Earth, but in live video, in 1 meter resolution? And a lot of the inspiration that we drew from were astronauts who talked about when they saw Earth from space, they realized that we were all one organism, that we were all one thing, and that we weren't separate, and that it had profoundly affected how they viewed life. And a big part of our vision was like, well, if we could bring that to the world, that's a big goal, and that's something that we really want to do. And that's what we set out doing. That's exactly why we took off and started doing UrtheCast. So the first thing that we had to do is we had to validate some sort of concept around what this was. So the notion of having video from space that anybody could have access to, that's a great concept, but we needed to get validation around how other people would want to use it. Is it really a good idea? Is it just novel? Does it have a big enough market size? And so concept validation is really about assembling a team that are, quite frankly, strong enough and visionary enough in order to not understand what the end result is. To actually jump into something without knowing what the answer is. It's about asking the right questions and getting excited about getting aligned around the questions that we ask. And so we go through an offsite process and get everybody's shared vision of the concept pointed in one direction. And when you get to the end of that, you've got something that really is quite invigorating to go out and be tested.
We're here at South by Southwest, and I'm here with Eric from UrtheCast, and they just launched a new platform here, and Eric's going to tell us a little bit about it.
Now, to go out and test that, we would go to trade shows, we'd go down into the startup community, we'd go into the space community, and at the end of it, we came back with a concept that we felt had legs. The challenge then became, well, how do you build a minimum viable product of, a camera in space shooting video? I mean, that's not like $1,000 minimum viable product. We had to raise some money and we had to get some people behind the whole project. And some of those early minimum viable products were literally mocked up aspect ratio cameras put into helicopters shooting, ground segments of cars moving and events happening and stuff like that. And then testing those in certain user environments and with different UXs and UIs, and getting that feedback and then taking it out to the market and saying, would this video be sellable out there? Is there value in it? And getting through that product validation phase was an incredibly creative process.
All right, imagine being able to see the entire Earth in high definition, live, as extraordinary events unfold.
At this point, we had now got to the point where we had raised, a couple $1 million. And we were actually now starting to get some press, and we were actually starting to do some business development with organizations like the United Nations. And now we really needed to validate whether it was financeable in a big way, because this isn't a small undertaking. This wasn't a $5 million or even a 10 or a 20 or a $30 million endeavor. And now we're talking $60 million plus to pull this off. So then we got to the market validation, and that was really a matter of taking it out to a lot of venture capitalists and a lot of angel investors, and showing people the concept and what we had, and determining what that buy-in was from them, and what type of market validation we could get from a financing perspective. I think a lot of people that build companies or design products, they tend to think if you build a great product, everybody's going to show up. And I don't care how good your product is. We have done this over and over, that if you can't finance that product, there's no point in building it, even if there's seemingly great demand for it, because you won't be able to scale, or you won't be able to meet customer expectations, or whatever the case is. So that's a big part of the whole creative engine that we have at Business Instincts Group, is a knowledge of how to create the financing behind a validated product and a validated concept. And in that regard, we start with the end in mind. We really start with, we've got to get to the point of understanding if we can finance it, and what the exit is for the investors, or what the exit is for the founders, or what the exit is for the product, or how is this thing really going to scale out there. But the project itself was absolutely one of the most fascinating projects that I could imagine that we've worked on. We're certainly now able to build on that and do some other really cool things. But the opportunity to work with everything from local investors through to the Russian Space Agency, right through to the United Nations and all the management team and the scientists that had to be hired. And, if you can pull that off, there's probably not a lot of projects that you couldn't pull off.